So, a lecture on reading Whitman and particularly the Song of Myself. What is the? Sorry, the dog wants to get the thing thrown for her. How to read Song of Myself? What is the self? I think we have to remind ourselves when we see the word self in Whitman that we're certainly dealing with the same self that we saw in the PowerPoint for Emerson. The self is not an indication of an isolated individual like a blade of grass standing apart from other people, but it's a notion of selfhood that is plural. I think one of the first wonderful questions I got from a colleague of mine a long time ago about Walt Whitman was, okay, what is the number of the word grass? Is it singular or plural or both? And it's perfect. Leaves of grass, in a sense that we have this individuality, of course, difference. Gosh, difference. He's not erasing difference at all. He's celebrating difference. Leaves are separate and different, but they are of grass. That is, the blades, are different, but they have the same root. We went through this in Transcendentalism. So it begins. I just want to sort of look a little bit at the first few chants, these sections that are numbered here. They weren't in the original. First few sections, then look at a middle one to see how to read these catalogs, and then look perhaps at the end for kind of it's sort of the end of the beginning of his book, because this is the first big poem, couple thousand lines, in a book of only 12 poems. It's by far the longest poem in the collection. Your beginning reads, I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I mean, once you've been through Transcendentalism, I think that kind of, that makes sense. Once you've read your Emerson, that makes sense. What doesn't necessarily make sense is that middle one. What I assume, you shall assume. First of all, it's about time. That is what I assume. That is what I already know to be the basis of my ideas. Your assumptions you never articulate. You just think and speak out of your assumptions. You shall assume. In other words, I think what he's getting at is that right now we have Whitman, who is in touch with the roots of his relationship to the world and everyone else in it. But the shall is about his reader. And very much like Thoreau, actually, Whitman is insistent, and even more than Thoreau. He makes demands on his reader. He's screaming at his reader, you there. He literally says that, you up there. One of the wonderful commands in this poem is, thrust me beneath your clothes. And by which the me is the book. And he means basically put the book in your pocket, and carry it with you. That's sort of toward the end. But anyway, he's trying to translate basically what he is thinking out of, and reminding his reader that they also are thinking out of the same stuff. If you want to talk about the elemental units of the universe, or our national principles, or our commonality as human beings, whatever it is, we all have the same base, the same assumptions out of which these differences can emerge, right? And that's the key. That difference can exist even as we acknowledge our commonality. The word that comes to mind is the stupid, the motto of the nation that no one believes. And by the way, Whitman is an idealist. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he is making a argument for the ideal understanding of the self in the nation, right? These poems are written right before the Civil War in order to avoid the Civil War, if you can believe that. He literally meant to write a poem to unite the country. The preface to Leaves of Grass is much more clear about that. talks about the country and his countrymen. Um, Last lines, I'll just flip back to the preface to Leaves of Grass in 1855. An individual is as superb as a nation when he has the qualities which makes a superb nation. The soul of the largest and wealthiest and proudest nation may well go halfway to meet that of one of its poets. So he sees, again, like what I already assume, you shall assume, there's this poet-reader relationship that he's trying to build. And what this poem does, and this is why I warned you about understanding Whitman only by reading him, it trains you in its form to think in a different way, not to see differences, but to see connections, even in what seems so different. Even what seems so different. The president and a prostitute show up right together in Chant 15. I'll show you in a second. But anyway, here he is. Writing out of original energy in Chant 1. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. So, that's the elemental symbol of this entire poem. It's sort of the symbol that gathers everything around it. And he pretends not to try too hard, right? He pretends to be a loafer. He pretends to be a flaneur, somebody who just wanders around and sort of takes it all in. And number 2 starts with that rhyme that I talked about. And number 2 is clever. Number 2 is the trick, right? Number 2 is this funny joke about other people's poetry. And he knows he's writing something completely different. Houses and rooms are full of perfumes. The shelves are crowded with perfumes. Houses and rooms are still full of perfumes is the ballad rhyme stanza, right? I breathe the fragrance of myself and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. So we can get caught up in form that is familiar and pretty. He's not going to give us that pretty. He's not going to give us the veneer. What is perfume but something that covers over what is elemental, what is natural? Okay, so you imagine this guy kind of smell. The atmosphere, he continues, is not a perfume. It has no taste of the distillation. It is odorless. It is for my mouth forever. I am in love with it. I will go to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. I mean, holy hell. He's already, how many lines? 15 lines in. He has just shocked everybody who's reading. This is where Rufus Griswold would have cut in. It's, oh my God, this is profane. And this is Victorian America. And man, he was ready to blow the roof off of our understanding of ourselves and of understanding of nature and our relation to it. I mean, and he starts to celebrate his body in the next series of lines. In line 32, though, he gets thematic on you, and he basically says, well, why are you reading this anyway? He says, stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and the sun. There are millions of suns left. You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the specters in books. I mean, quoting American Scholar here, quoting Emerson saying, don't, just repeat what you've read, experience of yourself. This is just American Scholar. You shall not look through my eyes either. Remember Thoreau? He said to his scholar, out there, don't try to do what I'm doing. Don't go building a cabin. You got to find your own way to have an original relation to nature and understand it. Nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides and filter them for yourself. So the all sides, he's got to present in this poem, all sides. He has to present not only the slave, but the slave dealer. That's what we got in that poem that I started with. I Sing the Body Electric, a later poem in this collection. He mocks the position of the slave auctioneer and finds in the property he's selling such a value that you can't even imagine it, that the price that we're putting on people could not be large enough. So he sets it up. It's me and you, and I'm sitting here on maybe a hillside, and my readers around me, and we're observing grass, and I'm talking about our relationship to this world and nature. Just really briefly, chant 4, trippers and askers surround me. A tripper is somebody who's trying to trip you up in an argument. An asker is a beggar. People I meet, the effect upon me of my early life, or the ward and city I live in, or the nation, the latest dates, discoveries, inventions, societies, authors old and new, the real or fancied indifference of some man or woman I love. All these things, he says, come at me, but I'm not sort of baffled by them. Again, like Emerson, he's just going to let them flow off his back and know that deep sense of selfhood and not get all tripped up in the superfluities, the effects, the perfume of life, right? If you want to look at a little meditation on the grass as a symbol, chant 6. A child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. He's not going to give you answers. He is going to force you to make those connections and to realize your relationship to the universe. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, obviously green, out of hopeful green stuff woven. Or I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrancer designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name somewhere in the corners, that we may say and see and remark and say, whose? It is a uniform hieroglyphic. So this is his name of talking about a polymorphous, a polysemic symbol. It's wonderful. So you work through this, and you work through stanzas like, chants like number 15, where it's just a pure list, a catalog, one item after the next, of items, of people, of images. I love the moment where talks about the farmer stops by the bars as he walks on a first day loaf and looks at the oats and rye. The lunatic is carried at last to the asylum, a confirmed case. He will never sleep any more as he did in the cot in his mother's bedroom. The jour printer with gray head and gaunt jaws works at his case. He turns his quid of tobacco while his eyes blur with the manuscript. The malformed limbs are tied to the surgeon's table. What is removed drops horribly in a pail. I mean, these everyday images, these quotidian sort of civilized images next to disgusting, what many readers would consider disgusting sort of graphics, bodily images of surgery. He pities the prostitute, the opium eater over on line 303. The opium eater reclines with rigid head and just open lips. The prostitute drags her shawl. Her bonnet bobs on her tipsy and pimpled neck. The crowd laugh at her blackguard oaths. The men jeer and wink to each other. Miserable, I do not laugh at your oaths nor jeer you. The president, holding a cabinet council, is surrounded by the great secretaries. Well, there it is. The prostitute right next to the president. And they both have the same humanity. They have both the same identity and origin. And he's trying to teach us not to be surprised to see these two in, that kind of proximity. So the poem trains us as we read, trains us to read in new ways. He occasionally rises to the surface and tells us what he's doing. But like in chant 44. It is time to explain myself. Let us stand up. And in old sermons, you had to stand up for the end of this, actually for a whole sermon. So it becomes a kind of sermon, and it becomes more thematic. And I love the way it ends. It's some of the most beautiful poetry in 19th century America. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wilds, it coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air. I shake my white locks at a runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. Fantastic.